As a driven dentist, you see the world differently. Where some see scarcity, you see abundance. When others want to give up, you keep going. You're building an amazing life of significance. That means you can't rely on ordinary advice from ordinary advisors to get to your goals. You want advice that's going to help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love, the causes you care about, and make your dent in the universe. But the fact is, this advice remains hidden because relatively few professionals are well versed in them, and the extremely affluent don't care to let you know about them. Join us as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families. Welcome to Dental Wealth Nation. Here's your host, Tim McNeely.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Dental Wealth Nation. And I got a question for you. Do you know your numbers? Now, when it comes to the realm of retirement planning and helping dentists build a lifetime of income, I can help you figure out those numbers. But when it comes to really driving the value of your dental practice, I don't really know those numbers so well. But the good news is, I know people who can help you figure out those numbers better than anyone else. And that's why I'm excited to have Vin Cardillo here today. Vin is the founder and CEO of Pronto, and he is going to help you understand the numbers and the metrics in your practice to help you drive EBITDA and help you drive value. Vin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Always nice to see you and chat with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. I always love our conversations, and I learn so much every time I talk to you about the industry, about practices, and you are just such a wealth of knowledge, and that's why I'm so excited to have you here today. But for those who don't know you, give me a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this area.
Yeah, so it's kind of a long story since I've been in it quite a while now. But in the 90s, I graduated from an MBA program and partnered with a friend of mine that was managing a number of dental practices. And I said, we should get into this business. And because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and we did with a dentist. And we were very successful. In our first year, we did a de novo location with not much money. And he was a very good friend of mine, and we didn't have things in writing, and that exploded in about a year or so. And I ended up buying him out and moved forward with my partner dentist. And we got to a point where we had 6 locations. I was still in my 20s, and we were probably the first DSO, small, non-private equity-backed DSO in Massachusetts in those times. And we decided to sell to a company called Great Expressions back then. This was 2005 maybe, and this was still before they had received private equity. They had 40 locations. I took on a role of running the Northeast operations for them for 3 years. I did that for 3 years, took a couple of years off, thought I'd never get back into dentistry, and then moved to Florida with a colleague of mine, a dentist, a friend of mine, that sold right around the same time I did. He and his partner sold to Heartland. I sold to Great Expressions. Their non-competes are up. They wanted to get back into the business. So in 2011, I moved to Florida, and we started with 3 locations, and in 28 months, we had 31, and we sold it to a private equity firm, and that firm was number 14 on the Inc. 500 list that year. So it was a wonderful experience. And then after that, I
want to stop you there for a second. Take us back into what it was like going from 3 to what, 38 locations?
31 in 28 months. Basically, it was 1 a month. But
right, how do you even do that? Right, what was that process like?
You know, we had some experience going through it ourselves before to some degree, but never at that level. We partnered together for what we needed, right? I ended up selling because I didn't have a good dentist partner that could grow doctors. He sold because he didn't have a good operations person that can help him grow operations. So we found ourselves, took each other's lanes, and really were able to catapult what we were doing. And we put together a very compelling model that attracted a lot of dentists, and it was a successful business.
Wow, that's amazing. And I want to pull back a little bit. And as you were doing that, were there certain numbers, and we're going to get into this here a little later in the show, but what were the numbers that you were paying attention to? What were the metrics and the practices that you were looking at, or were you even looking at them at that time? Because, this was a while ago that you were doing this.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was a while ago, I guess. I mean, my job was these acquisition and partnerships that we brought in. We need to improve their businesses in a short period of time, because shortly thereafter, we had to show the numbers to a private equity firm, which had to show that anyone we brought on, we added value to. And the only way we truly were able to do that, it was to compile metrics and show the doctors real numbers that were believable, so they can take a look at and their teams can work on these small items, bits and pieces at a time. And what we found was, working on small pieces at a time, and very focused, it would impact the practice.
Yeah. Well,
it took a lot of work. We had 2 full-time people, pulling data out of practice management systems and putting them into Excel spreadsheets full-time. Right. So
lots of data coming in scattered places, and you had to find out how to make sense of all of this stuff, didn't you?
Correct. So now you've got the data. So now you've got to turn it into an actionable item. But in order to do so, you have to go through all this data and identify which ones are an opportunity. Let's say which ones we can work on.
Yeah.
So that's kind of led us down the path. All my past experiences led me down the path to where we've come today. But what we would do back then was, all right, what is a benchmark standard for this particular metric? And how are we doing on that particular metric over a number of periods of times that we would look at, and then say, okay, well, look, we're off on this metric based on a benchmark, an industry standard, and we're actually off it for numbers of period. We've been off it last year. We haven't gotten any better. And this month we're off. So let's pick this and let's start working on this.
Wow. Well, right. And I think this is such an important distinction for some of the doctors who may be listening. Is really the first step is you got to kind of like figure out what kind of business you're in, because there's lifestyle businesses and then there's businesses that are focused on value creation. And when you start measuring those things, right, you really got to show those tangible improvements. And so, the other day I was talking to a doctor. She's like, oh, my practice hasn't made me any money, and, it's about worth what I paid for it. And I said, but yeah, how long have you owned your practice? She's like, 20 years. I'm like, okay, how much income have you taken from it? And, she's pulled $2 million of income, but it's been a lifestyle business, right, because she hasn't been focused on creating enterprise value. And when it comes to creating enterprise value, those numbers really matter, don't they?
Right. So, one of the big shifts that has happened in the industry, obviously with all the DSOs coming in, looking at practices and valuing them, if a doctor or a dentist wants to increase the value of their business or just understand the value of their business, the first there's 2 steps that you got to do. One is you have to get to EBITDA, right? That's your earnings, right, before a number of items. And it's basically your cash flow. And in order to do that, you need to take out any of your personal expenses out of that piece. And then you have to pretend that you are a dentist associate and insert in your profit and loss statement the cost that it would be to pay you as an associate as a doctor compensation expense, to see that if you went home, if you owned this as a business and you didn't have to work it and you put another dentist in there, how much money could you make? Right. And dentists are not used to doing that because that's not the way it's been. It's like, hey, I'll get out of school and I'll get a job and then I'll go buy a practice and I'll turn it into a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
But
Well,
the
right.
dentists that have figured this out have made generational wealth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mindset shift too, because you really are moving, from that doctor in a lifestyle practice who's paying yourself both salary, right? You're paying yourself as the associate, as a
Yep,
W-2 employee, and you're taking profits out of the business. And
correct.
essentially, you got to figure out, hey, what does it cost to replace me in the practice and make that shift from dentist and owner, an operator of the practice to just the owner, no longer working in the business. So that is a fundamental shift. But like you said, Vin, you start doing this, it creates massive wealth, doesn't it?
Yeah, because once you figure it out once, what happens is you create confidence in yourself, right? And once you're confident, you want to do it again. And when you do the second one and you're successful at it, you're confident, you want to do it again. It's just like dentists doing their first implant, right? They're not as confident doing it. They do 50 implants, they're much more confident. And it's getting that confidence. So we believe the numbers is what gives the confidence to an owner dentist.
Yeah. Well, and with tracking the numbers, how do you see most doctors today tracking those numbers, if even? Are they using their practice management software? Are they still pulling Excel spreadsheets? Like what are most doctors that, and you work with a lot of very successful DSOs out there, what do you see them doing when they're tracking their numbers, if they're even tracking it at all?
Yeah, so most people will, pull data out of the practice management software and use a third-party dashboard. And the dashboard is basically pulls data out of the practice management system only and shows you certain metrics of data outside of the system, right? What percent of your procedures are perio, what's your production, your collection, production per hour. However, in today's day and age, we've gone from really having just the practice management software as the technology around our practice to having all sorts of technologies. Now your phone is a VoIP over IP system where we have patient engagement software, right? We have text messaging software. We have your QuickBooks software. You have human resource software, payroll software, right? All of these softwares around the practice where you need to get data from. And those particular items we're seeing are left alone, right?
Hmm.
Not many people are digging into their voice over IP system to understand how many phone calls they're missing, right? So it is when we moved our business, when we sold the last group and I moved into this consulting space that we've been in, we were working with clients, and one of the things that occurred was that there's so much data that needs to be obtained. We were having practices, put data on Google Sheets and Excel spreadsheets, and they were becoming irritated, about it. And I'm saying we don't have enough, and there was this big gap, and that's what led us to the development of this Pronto technology.
Wow. Well, right, because collecting data in and of itself, it can be a project if you don't have a system, if you don't have a workflow for doing this. And I can only imagine if you've got 31 practices, you've probably, right, and if you're in high growth mode, bringing practices on, you've got different software platforms, you've got different vendors, you've got different data silos. Like this is a massive issue out there for anyone trying to really grow and scale, and more importantly, show the value to your potential acquirers down the road.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And having access to the data is one thing, but having the ability to interpret it is another thing.
Let's talk about that a little. What do you mean access to data versus interpreting data? How does that differentiate? What's the difference between those?
So the current dashboards and technologies, they just give you data. So now you have data, but how do you know there's a problem?
Like what's an example of some of the data it may give me? Is it hygiene appointments? Is it recall? Is it
let's say it's
phone numbers
recall,
coming in?
right? So let's say it's recall. So they're going to tell you, okay, your recall is 32%. Is there an industry benchmark? Does everyone know it? Now, that's kind of an easy one. Everyone in the industry probably knows, hey, look, we should be at least 85% of getting our patients back, recall, getting them scheduled, right? But do I know if I'm trending in the right direction? I might be at 84 this month, but what is my 12-week average? Is it 82? And how am I doing this year versus last year? Right? And how am I doing? So what that led us to do is you need to have a goal. Right? So a goal helps identify if there's a problem there. So now at least you can check it against the goal. And then secondly, you would have to look at how that metric compared to its goal over numerous periods of time. If you can see all of that in front of you, and you can have something that basically does all the math for you and highlights that, hey, look, this is red, it's a problem, it makes life a whole lot easier.
Wow. Well, so let's dive into how you start, right? What are even the things, right? We mentioned hygiene and comparing it to the benchmarks, right? And I love that because now you've got a target that you can drive towards. But how do you start, making this simple and actionable?
Yeah. So what we've done with Pronto, because we've identified creating goals in the time frames. So what we do is we bring in data from all of those technologies. Currently today, we have about 205 metrics. We have a couple other technologies coming in the future that would drive that to 220. Of the 200, there are 148 that are goalable. So when we work with a client and we onboard them, we literally have to put a goal per metric, per month, per office. Right? So you got 148, goals that you have to set per month, per office. So if you had 10 offices, you're doing a lot of upfront work, but that upfront work helps create the guardrails, right? That's how am I doing against my goal? The next piece are the time frame. So now we have the goals. We say, hey, how are you doing month to date to goal? How are you doing year to date to goal? What's your 12-week trend? How are you doing this year versus last year? How are you doing your trailing 12 months versus your last full months? And if there's all red lights there, I can guarantee you it's one of two things. Your goals are too high or you got a problem. So the decision is, so what we've created is something that could put data in front of you that you can look at and quickly make a decision. Now, because there's 148 of them, and if you had 10 offices, it becomes overwhelming. So we've now created an AI tool that goes in and pulls the worst out through our Pronto AI mechanism and says, okay, well, look, here's your top 30 that are the worst. And hey, look, now from here, you can click this particular metric and timestamp it and turn it into an opportunity, work with your team and say, hey, look, you know what? We're going to work on new patient phone calls being answered because we're missing 22% of our new patient phone calls, which is, connected to, just regular patient phone calls, right? Right. And so, well, what's happening? So you're off by 22%. Let's go take a look at your voice over IP system. We had this happen 2 weeks ago, right? We unloaded a client. We're like, hey, doc, you're missing 39% of your phone calls. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, we're pulling data. You're missing 39%. So from a voice over IP technology, for instance, they have maybe 100 metrics in there because they work with call centers and things of that nature. But we bring maybe their top 5 or 6 in. We want to be the monitoring system. So the red flag got raised. We said, hey, let's log into the voice over IP system. And what we found out that 76% of the 39% of the phone calls that were being missed were happening during lunch. And he's like, oh my God. What happened was we stopped answering the phone at COVID and I totally forgot about it and no one's been answering it. So he's been going 4 years, missing 39% of the phone calls. They fixed that and it went right down to 22.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Wow.
So our new technology, our next generation, which is coming out in 2 months, will actually show you if you hit this goal, it would bring this much more revenue in.
Wow. Well, right. What a powerful tool because, right, as a business owner, right, so often you can feel overwhelmed by all the possible directions you have to go in, right? What are the things you should focus on in your practice to drive value? And here's a system that's going to take all the technologies, it's going to pull the data in, it's going to help you analyze it, and it's going to tell you, like, here's the activities that are the highest dollar that you should really spend your time focusing on. That's
Exactly.
incredible, Vin.
So when you focus on those small items, it turns into the result on your top line.
Yeah.
Everyone's always worried about, okay, my production goal, my production goal, my production goal. Okay, that's great, but there are a number of underlying factors that impact that. And we're at the end of the year, and we're running a bunch of this year versus last year numbers, and we're seeing some pretty staggering results where we've got some case studies on, hey, look, you know what, on these 10 metrics, here's what the change was. And because of the changes of these 10 smaller metrics, here's what it did to collections, production, and EBITDA, right? I could give an example of that if you'd like.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'd love to work through an example. That would be amazing.
So here's a practice where one of the initiatives was to decrease their over 90 insurance. And in 1 year, they decreased their over 90 accounts receivable by 70%. Their hygiene recall was increased by 30%. Their perio recall was increased by 60%. Total visits was up 22%. New patients was up 19%. Annual production on new patients was up 46%. Total reviews was up 233%. Percentage of new patient calls missed decreased by 38%. And the office team retention increased by 68%. And the result was that practice's production was up by 57%. Collections were up 87%. And EBITDA was up 117%.
Wow.
Right. So it's working on the little things that impacts what we really want to impact.
Mm-hmm. Well, right, and that's what you want to do as a value creator is you want to move from just average earnings into best in class, and right, by doing that, because you can't control the range that your practice is going to sell for. That's set by the industry.
Correct.
But what you can control is you can control where in that range you fall, and a practice that's managed well is going to get a higher multiple than a practice that's not managed so well. So what a great tool. I mean, it increases the attractability of the business so much.
And if you notice the number of those metrics, it's not all about money, right? Mm-hmm. It's, hey, they got 233% increase in reviews.
Yeah.
Well, that means people are liking the practice, right? If your hygiene recall increases dramatically, you're getting your patients in sooner. That's a quality of care issue. I just canceled my appointment the other day with a dentist that I go to who used to work for my group 20 years ago. And they're like, you can't, okay, your next appointment's April. I'm like, April? I'm not waiting till April. I want my teeth clean. I don't want my teeth cleaned every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm concerned about, I don't want to wait another 3 months, have my teeth cleaned in 9 months. I want to have them done in 6 months. So I'm going to go somewhere else. So that hygiene retention is kind of a quality of care issue also, right? It's not just about dollars.
Yeah, right. It flows back to patient care and how well you're taking care of people. Yeah, no, it's important to measure these things. So important. And how long does it take to start getting set up on Pronto? Is this months long? Is it something that happens quickly? Like how do you even start implementing something like this? Because once again, my mind here, and I'm like, this is a big problem you're working on, Vin. This doesn't sound like a simple thing to do.
Yeah, the onboarding. It depends how many practices you have, but if you're one or 2 to 5 practices, it's 30 days. We can get a lot of the data in there going, enough to get working. That's for sure.
Amazing. How exciting. So,
Yeah.
who's really ideal for this? Is it the sole practice? Is it 5 practices, 10? I mean, I know anyone can use this, but where do you really see the value being driven by Pronto in this product?
Yeah. So, we think it's, multi-location, right? Even if it's 2 to 70, whatever it is. I continue to be shocked, sitting and speaking with people that have 60 offices that don't have this. It's
Mhm.
amazing to me that, they can operate that way. But if you've got one practice and you're a believer in data, you would love it.
Hmm.
If you got one practice and your intentions are that you want to grow, this would be a great thing to add as your foundation for when you move to additional practices,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And if you got 2 and you want to grow, if you got 5 and you understand there's a problem, it's powerful. This is where the future is, right? Our future piece will be AI, where we have predictive analytics that's going to say, okay, based on the number of new patients you have, and based on your retention rate, you're going to need to add X hygiene hours in 5 months, right? And you're going to have to add X doctor hours in X months based on what we have for patient volume. So there's a number of those that will also help drive the practice.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, right, what you're doing, it isn't just installing a piece of software in a practice either. It really is the consulting piece that you're also providing to help the doctors, once again, understand and move from just reporting to actually creating performance out of it. So talk a little bit about the role that actually consulting plays in this too.
Yeah, so the way we've set it up is we would onboard, we do a training, right? And that, we're with you for 2-3 months or so between doing training and things of that nature. And at that point, you can just choose to go on your own, or you can choose to be, us tied a little bit closer with you for a year or a number of months, where we can kind of handhold you and or your team to make sure it's getting utilized right and you get the most value out of it.
Oh,
We don't want it to be left and not used. We see a lot of these technologies where people are paying for it and they don't use it. And we've made an internal commitment that we want to support the practice to a point where we know they're comfortable, and that's why we do a training. It's almost like the training is like where you're quizzed on it. So we can go back to the doc and say, okay, well, look, we've trained so and so, but John, he didn't pass, but Mary did, or whatever. And how can we work with John to grow him?
yeah. So actually coming back to that, right? The team members, who are the team members that you want involved in this? How do you figure out who should be running this and reporting it? Is it across the whole practice? Is everyone looking at this? Is it office managers? Is it the management team? Like how do you start really using this to drive it forward in an efficient way?
Yeah. So typically it's either if it's one office, it's the office manager and the doctor. If it's
Hmm.
multiple offices, it's whoever that operations person is. And the managers, all the managers and front desk people would use one aspect of it, which is the morning huddle. We've got a huddle that also brings in data from multiple sources, which enriches the morning huddle a bit. So they have access to that. But then it becomes really a tool for the operations person to work with the manager on, or the doctor to work with the manager on, because we've already identified in your opportunity section of the software the things that we should be focused on. And you can literally go there every day and see how we're moving the needle, right? So if our recall number is one of our opportunities and we started at 60%, and our goal for the quarter is to get it to 70, and we're halfway through and we're at 65, it's going to be green and say, hey, look, you moved the needle 9%.
Well, and I love what you were talking about a little bit earlier too, right? The red light, yellow light, green light. So talk to me a little bit about that, because that actually sounds like this makes it a little bit more fun than just some raw data coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it stands out and it tells you that this is off, and it's off of the goal that you've created, right? So there needs to be an equilibrium, if you will. We've got to manage the goals and make sure the goals are appropriate. But once you have that, if it's red, that means we're off your goal. Now, you might be off your goal this month, but year to date you might be green. So you know what? We're not worried about it because we got a 3-month trend that's green. We got a year that's green, and this month is red. Be like, look, you just watch it, but we're doing well across the board.
Yeah, right. So it can help you spot things before they happen. And the reason I mentioned the red light, yellow light, green light is, in my past life, I used to be a gamer, right? I loved video games. I love running those quests and played a lot of World of Warcraft. I don't know that I should be admitting that live, but I did. And I would run around doing the little quests, finding the right person to talk to get the imaginary gold, to go buy the imaginary thing. And then one day I had this epiphany. I'm like, why am I wasting time on these games? Because the ultimate game is the game of business, right? You talk to the right people, you create value in the marketplace, and you don't unlock imaginary stuff. You unlock real stuff. You get that new house, you get that vacation with your family, you get the things that are important. And so that was a huge mindset shift. But I still love those gamification aspects in things that I do. And you got to make these things fun. And so, I love that idea of just having a system where your team can come together. You can be looking at things and you get those alerts and you get to drive the practice forward and almost having that gamification aspect to it. So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. And you know what, you bring up a very big and important point here around the gamification. We feel in the future, we want to actually add gamification bonuses where we can show an organization, look, here's a bonus plan that we've got that, hey, look, it's connected to maybe the morning huddle that shows, hey, yesterday you hit your goal. So everyone that worked yesterday automatically gets, practice Zoe reward points.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, we're thinking about that for the future for sure.
Yeah, well, and I think that's where the future is heading too, right? Especially with so many of the people today having been raised in gaming culture. The more fun you can make the workplace, and the more engaging you can make it, the better your employees are going to do. The better experience you're going to provide for your patients. The higher care they're going to get. It helps make everything so much better out there. So I love what you're doing with this. Right, for someone who's considering this, how do they learn more about it? How do they see the power of Pronto, Vin?
Yeah, I mean, they could go to www.prontobymava.com. They could give me a buzz at 413-433-2550, or shoot me an email at vin@mavaadvisory.com.
All right. And actually, let's talk a little bit about Mava real quick. We got a couple minutes. What is Mava and what do you do there?
Yeah, so Mava has been the legacy business, which we have worked with small groups over the past 10 or 15 years, and we help them basically hit their goals. Right? We work with someone that's got 3 practices that wants to get to 5 in 3 years. Right? We help them build their organizational structure. We guide them in that, and if they need support at the administrative level, we step in as a fractional support, either as a fractional COO, a fractional CFO, fractional hygiene coach. So we've got a number of people that have experience in all aspects of DSOs. So we don't put everybody in. We've got a generic, not generic, we've got a system where we look at the practice, understand where they want to go, put together a treatment plan, and we start moving forward in that direction. And when it gets to a point where we've now hit a point where it's okay, where are we with our perio percent? Do we have a perio policy in practice? And if they don't have one, we might say, look, here's how you do it. If they can't do it, we say, look, you should get a third party or you can use us to do it. Right. And we plug in to support until they get big enough that it makes sense for them to get rid of us as a fractional and hire their own full-time person. Right. So, if you've ever built a DSO, a multi-practice, you get into the business thinking, oh my God, I make 400,000 out of this practice. I'm going to make 400,000 out of 10 of them. Well, it doesn't really work that way because you got to build a support team to be able to handle that. And next thing you know, you realize, okay, I got 3 practices that make $1 million, but I'm spending 600,000 in the support team. So now I'm making 400, which was what I was making with 1 practice. So if you can fractionalize that, you can save $300,000 a year, right? So that's what we do, helping small groups grow.
Wow, amazing. And so, any closing thoughts before we sign off here, Vin? If someone's thinking about this, or they feel confused, or they just don't know their numbers, well, what would you tell them? How would you encourage them?
So I would tell them, first and foremost, your profit and loss statement. You need to, you must tell your clients all the time, right? So you need a monthly profit and loss statement. And so if you don't have a monthly one, you need to get one. So depending on who does your books, if it's your accountant that does your books, make sure they give you a monthly a P&L statement, but they have to explain it to you, right? So you got to start learning what that profit and loss statement is, where those expenses are, understand what the metrics are around dental supplies, front office expense, dental assistant expense, your rent expense, what those should be, to see if you're in line. And then inquire about what your practice management software will give you for some data to get inquisitive about it. But if you want to explore deeper, you can give us a call. I'm happy to go over, anything with any one of your watchers here.
Oh, excellent. Well, hey, thank you for that offer, Vin. So kind. And I would encourage you got to know your numbers. You got to know the numbers, not just in your business. You need to know them in your personal life. You need to know those numbers, because they're going to help you make good decisions. And that's the thing. We're so overwhelmed by so many things going on today, and you want to spend your time on the things that matter most. But to do that, you got to look at the numbers. You got to move from just just reporting the numbers to actually understanding them. And if you do that, you're going to be able to increase the value of your practice, the value of your life. You're going to have more fun. Your team's going to have more fun. Your business is just going to be a better business. So I'm excited about what you're doing here, Vin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate you and you having me on here. And yeah. I hope the conversation was helpful for everyone.
Oh, it was excellent. And I'm excited. I mean, it makes me want to own a dental practice so I can just track this stuff. I'll let my wife own the dental practice for a while.
Exactly.
So, hey, thank you everyone for tuning in. And I'd encourage you to reach out to Vin. Go listen to something he was on a while ago. Listen to his past episode. Great stuff. Go ahead and implement this in your practice and start seeing the results. You won't regret it. Until next time, we'll see you again here soon on the Dental Wealth Nation Show. Thanks again, Vin.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dental Wealth Nation. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Join us next time as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families, and help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love. Till next time, make sure to hit the website at dentalwealthnation.com.